So we're live.
We're not live. We're recording.
We're on. Yeah, we're on. We're on.
Yeah.
And we're back on. Do you know what we're back on this evening, James?
The podcast.
Correct. That's an excellent. And do you know what? For that, you get through to the next round.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah. Fantastic.
Do you know what I watched today, actually? Which was I'll finish this very quickly.
Was it Fight Club? Was it?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I've refused to watch that again. It caused some consternation in our household, actually, because I think they were under a misapprehension as well. So maybe we do need a family rewatch.
So the entire family.
What are those things? What are those things called? Watch-alongs, isn't it? Where you can click in and click people. So we'll have to get a watch-along and click in the
So
the
me
tenants.
on one side, and the Eelies on the other.
Absolutely, yeah. We've got a fun night, right?
So
there,
you all got that wrong. Is that what I'm hearing? All of you thought that the line was...
I don't know what the word "yous" means, but yes, I believe we may have been under a misapprehension. So no, it wasn't Fight Club. It wasn't Fight Club this time. It wasn't Fight Club. I watched today the person who won the first American person to win on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
Oh, right, okay.
And I have seen the clip before, so I did know this, but it kind of triggered me to watch it again. Was that this guy, he hadn't used any lifelines, got to the last one, the £1 million question, chat reads it out. He goes, actually, can I ring my dad, please? Mm-hmm. Blah, blah, blah. Brings his dad, John, your son's here, he's on the £1 million question. Bob, or whatever his name was, John, I think his name was actually, over to you.
John and John.
Well, I don't think it was John and John. Bob, maybe. Bob was the dad. I can't remember. Anyway, and so John goes, Dad, I just wanted to ring you to let you know that I'm about to win £1 million because,
nice.
and I don't need your help with this answer. Absolutely brilliant. And he obviously did know the answer, but absolutely brilliant. And even before the clock had ticked in, he just goes, it was the former president who appeared on, I can't remember, talking, was Richard Nixon. Cue everyone going mental and stuff like that. But what a cool way to do it.
What a cool way to do it, and also really leaves no room for making an error there, does it? If you got that wrong, that would have looked terrible.
Yeah. You'd have dropped as well at that point. I don't know how a millionaire works these days, but you'd have dropped from 1 million to 32.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Which is 32 grand is not to be sniffed at if you're not a Premiership footballer, but that's a fair drop in anyone's language.
It is, yeah. You'd be a little bit gutted at the end of that, wouldn't you? A smidge.
And absolutely. But we're not just back doing the podcast. We're back top trumping today. Or top trumps with a Z, of course, to avoid any copyright issues that could come our way.
It's cooler to add a Z, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're on the street. Rough as, yeah.
Rough as. Yeah, we are definitely streetwise just for dropping that Z in there.
Absolutely. There's nothing that speaks streetwise more than a man with no hair wearing spectacles in an old football shirt.
Replacing all S's
sat in a comfy
Zs.
chair. Yeah, absolutely. It just screams South London.
If I didn't know you, James, I'd be terrified of you. Let's put it that way.
You would be. What with my gangstar approach to life.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously.
Yeah.
Real bad boy, etc. Bad boys,
with a Z,
of course, with a Z. But no, we are top trumping today, and I think backed by popular demand. After I think you were, even by our standards, our relationship standards, taken aback by the structure with which I gave our first top trump episode a bash.
I was, yes, yeah. But in fairness, though, it did go along quite well. I thought you did a very good job.
Was that damned with faint praise, Squire?
It wasn't.
Thank you. I thought not.
I was a bit shocked at first. I looked at it. I thought, oh, hang on a second. You've gone too deep here. But by the end of it, it did give
not
us...
the first time you said that, viewers and listeners. Yeah.
But by the end of it, we did have a nice round number, didn't we? So
we did, and a number that worked for you, I think, in that one, wasn't it? As Messi came out on top.
Yes, he did. Yeah, yeah. Which I think was fair. I think out of those players,
I think certainly after the Coupe du Monde, I think it was only pointing in one direction, probably, wasn't it?
Yes, I think so. So I know into this, I know who my top player is, and I know
you can't go into it like that because you have to give marks and you have to give them in an objective way.
I guess so.
At some point, you're going to get this wrong. This is serious stuff. This is not just some jollified podcast nonsense.
No, I guess not. But I guess I've got a sneaky suspicion of who my pick is, and I've got a sneaky suspicion who your pick is.
So I think, I think certainly, James, in terms of your selection, I think my hunch for your pick, mine will be one of the other two. Where it comes from in terms of numeration, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I guess as we go through.
Indeed, we will.
I have a suspicion. Yeah, sorry. I'm just saying I've got a suspicion.
Okay. And it's always nice to have a suspicion. Here we are. So who are we going to do? We're going to do, obviously, England's golden generation, the midfield that was Scholes, Gerrard and Lampard. We have to do it. It's a rite of passage. If you're going to do top trumps with a Z, close brackets, open brackets, close brackets, this is one we can't walk away from it, can we?
No, I feel like as a three, these two are... Oh, as a three, these two, brilliant.
Yeah, nicely done, nicely done. Premier broadcasting, Premier.
Yeah. As a three, these three are probably compared to. They've got to be three of the most contrasted against players that you. It ends up in a discussion with pretty much everybody, doesn't it?
Yeah, and do you think that comes from? I mean, obviously the fact that they didn't really play that much together. Despite the efforts of Crow Barrage, and also, do you think it comes from a point of view of actually? I think we all wonder whether, in say more fluid systems that exist at the moment, and even in say England's three in the midfield now, would that three work? And yes, no. My sense is they would have a much better chance of thriving within the more flexible tactical structures that exist now than they did in the rigid 4-4-2 of only 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think any half-decent manager of the modern era would find a way to put these three fantastic midfielders, arguably when all three were on the pitch, you could argue is one of the greatest midfields of its generation. The fact that an England manager couldn't make that work is astonishing. But these days you would think, you have those three in your team, you're going to have a great midfield.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't just that. I think, is it part of that whole broader frustration with that so-called golden generation of the fact that, we got so near but actually quite far when you compare it with the exploits of the current England side, certainly over the last three tournaments.
Well, I guess it just goes to show what the difference between a united group of players is, as like sort of the current England squad and this sort of distant, cliquey dressing room that would have existed back then.
Maybe, and also, I think that's they're all very, but maybe it's our frustration that we felt it could have been. So much better. I think the other part of this as well, bearing in mind midfield usually runs the game, and with any, if you look at like that Barcelona and Spanish midfield of a sort of few years after these guys, which basically kept the ball for fun and ran every game going with the three guys there. What amazed me in that whole period was we had all these players, but yet we still only ever seemed to have about 40% of the ball, even against like Ecuador or something. And we'd get through on a scrappy set piece or a Beckham free kick or a corner, whatever, and we'd hang on for half an hour whilst they pummeled us. But we never seemed to actually control matches, which when you look at the quality of those players and actually how, I suppose you would say, especially for their clubs, albeit with players from other countries around them, that these three players had the capability of doing?
Yes. I think you've got that completely spot on. The fact that I can think of one game actually, if I think of sort of games that England comfortably won in that era. I believe we beat Denmark 3-0 in one
3-0, yeah. 3 goals in the first half, of course.
Yeah, and I think that was about, so it's like post-2000.
Yeah.
That was probably the most comfortable game I saw England play at a major tournament. Everything else just seemed like it was...
Yeah, hanging on to your sort of side of your seat.
Or even if they weren't, even if it was like they were dominating the game, it was just, as you said, they needed like some scrappy goal in the 80th minute to win. I think we laboured past Trinidad and Tobago in one tournament.
Yeah, 2006. I think it's 2-0, wasn't it? But a couple of late goals, one from Gerrard, one from Crouch.
I remember it's funny as well because England were particularly good back then. At all the hype before a tournament, everyone was dead excited. All these players have had good domestic campaigns. Here we go. This is a great generation of players. They're going to do well. They always did a really good job, in fairness, to completely deflate all hope you had of winning the tournament in the opening match of a tournament. After the first game, you were like, that's not going to happen. Not going to happen at all.
And I think what's interesting, I suppose, looking at that cycle is by the time you get to 2010, 2012, and certainly post-2014, I think even your most ardent England fan, of which I would count myself as always someone who would watch any old tripe that England play in, to be honest, any pointless friendly or whatever, I'd always rock up and watch. But I must admit, even during that period, your expectation level had got to the point where it was so low that almost to the point of, I suppose, in a very English trait, maybe that kind of I don't know what you call it. The phrase where you're kind of it's the kind of you just become a parody of yourself type of thing. And I guess what's interesting is, I suppose, what the England team probably have to cope with now, and certainly moving into the next tournament, is actually we're back up to that heightened level of expectation,
yes,
which is a mix based on existing performances, allied to players coming through, allied to probably a far more open playing field in terms of actually the quality of the other sides around. That, with a couple of exceptions, you kind of think actually there's not a lot to be worried about here. And maybe that's partly, I haven't done us a disservice.
I was going to say, I think that's partially because we are a better team now.
Yeah,
but at this stage right now, we had a couple of decent tournaments back to back. The last one was okay, just came up against a very good team at the wrong time of the tournament, and arguably actually we're better than them, should have won. But that's a discussion for another time. But.
Yeah, it was very English, wasn't it? Our best performance is the one that sees us out of the tournament. Yeah.
But it would be nice to see this team go from potential to take that step now, because otherwise it's just going to be one of those things where we had potential at that time, but we never realised it at a tournament. So.
Maybe, but I also think as well, if you keep getting to semis and finals,
yes,
I think that's all you can really. If you get to that at some point, you kind of think the bounce of the ball, it's going to go your way.
You would hope so.
If you keep getting there, the law of average would say.
You would hope.
I suppose the thing we've never had really, apart from the last 3 tournaments, is that consistency of getting to that last 4 stage. Which, okay, it was last 8 last time, but it was as good as last 4, really, in terms of you're playing probably at least the second best team in the tournament, current champions, etc. And I think when you look at the top sides, the Germanys, the Brazils, the Argentinas, they typically always get to the last 4. So broadly speaking, you are at some point going to win something if you keep doing that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Oh yeah, hopefully it's this generation, because they've, as you say, they've renewed hope in the national team. They have,
and actually off the field, I think you can have your grumbles on Southgate sometimes with sometimes the sort of zero charisma approach,
overly pragmatic,
and certainly the inertness in terms of substitutions, but what you can't deny is I think they've been absolutely led by him off the pitch. Absolutely superb ambassadors, taking on a number of potentially thorny topics, but doing it in a way that was measured and made you kind of proud. To me, that's what a modern English person should be like.
Yeah, no, they've done a very good job. As I say, sometimes you get the frustration with a bit of the on-the-pitch stuff from Southgate, but in terms of a manager of England and the way he sort of carries himself and as it comes across in the media and things like that, I can't fault him there.
Yeah. But what would he have made of Gerrard, Scholes and Lampard? So what we're going to do, as we did last time, is kind of we've got a range of criteria, and basically, very simply, me and my colleague in crime will give them a mark out of 10 with some justification around it, and then we'll top them all up at the end and go for a sort of combined average from there. So are you ready with your scorecard, Jimbo?
I am.
Good man, good man. So we'll kick off then for club, first of all. So just to give a quick overview, Scholes, of course, one club man, Manchester United in 2 spells, 25, just the 25 trophies. Gerrard, Liverpool and LA Galaxy. The Galaxy, less talked about in fairness. 9 trophies at Liverpool, but of course no Premier League.
Mm-hmm.
And Lampard, West Ham.
How many Premier Leagues was that for Manchester United for Scholesy?
Oh, I don't know. Out of the 25, I'm guessing 7 or 8.
Yeah, it'll be a few, won't it? Yeah.
It'll be around that, isn't it? I think Giggs has won the most, but at least between 6 and 8, I would hazard a guess. And then Frank Lampard obviously started at West Ham. Surprisingly, didn't win a great deal there. Little spell on loan at Swansea. Were you aware of that?
I was not.
Oh, there you go. Learn something every day. Obviously, a long spell at Chelsea. Little spell at Manchester City towards the end of his career before also stepping across the Atlantic at New York City, obviously part of the Manchester City group of clubs. And he won 14 trophies in his time. And I think, if I'm right in thinking, he would have the full set, as in, I think he'll be one of the only players, actually, I suppose a few of those Chelsea players might do, to have the full set in terms of not just the full set domestically, but also Champions League and what would have been the UEFA Cup, because there won't be many that have got the full bagatelle there. So
Yes.
Well done to Frankie Boy on that one.
Yep.
So what are your thoughts, Jimbo? What are your thoughts on those guys from a club point of view?
I think this one might be one of the most straightforward of the ones. I think, in my mind, Scholes gets, Champions League winner, Premier League winner.
Yeah.
Did he win all the domestic cups? I assume
he won all the domestic, yeah.
All domestic.
Oh, maybe not league. I think he did win the League Cup, actually. They won it and he won the FA. He scored a goal in FA Cup final win in 99. So, yes, he would have had the full bag.
He's got to be. The only thing, obviously, on his is not winning the full. But, I think if you've won the Champions League, it doesn't matter if you've won the Europa League. Let's put that that way. I would argue Champions League trumps Europa. So,
well, yeah.
For me, the sheer number of trophies over such a long career, you got to give him a 10, don't you? 25
you're just
trophies.
Banging out the 10 straight away. You're no Craig Revel Horwood, are you? Straight in with a 10.
Yeah.
Stevie G?
Stevie G comes at the bottom of my list here. We'll give him an 8, and I think it would be fair to say, trophies-wise, he would have to be at the bottom of this 3-person list.
Okay, and Frank?
Frank's slap bang in the middle. I would give him a 9.
9. So interestingly,
I'm going off the number of trophies here, really, because I know Frank's won the extra trophy in terms of he's got the Europa League, but Scholes.
And I guess we will come on to a little bit now their influence on the teams they played in later on. So that'll be an interesting take on that. But yeah, I gave Scholes a 9, I gave Gerrard an 8 like you. And I gave Lampard a 9.
So what's your reasoning for Lampard and Scholes getting the same score here?
I think I'm guessing because Lampard would have had 3 Premier League. It's a good question, mate. I don't know. I can't give you a logic. Am I saying that his full set means something to me as a quiz sad boy?
It maybe. I would say that would be a legitimate reason to give.
Then on that basis, I will take the legitimate. You're just going to take
that one, yeah? Because I do get it. Like, he's got the full set, whereas Scholes wouldn't. But I just 25 trophies over that period. It's crazy.
It's mental, isn't it? Crazy. But then you've also got to say, although I think
he's got more than the other two put together.
He has. I can't change it now. I put it in. I locked it in.
You locked it in on
these shows. I locked it in.
Your first answer, isn't it? That's always the rule in the quiz show. Got to take your first answer.
We've locked it into the top Trumpz with a Z vault. So I can't change it, mate. I can't change it.
You'd love to, but you just can't.
I don't know. You're tempting me, but I'm not going to. You've got to stick to your guns. For country, we've talked for 5 minutes there about for country. Scholes represented England at the World Cups in 98 and 2002, and at the Euros in 2000 and 2004. Gained 66 caps, which I think surprises some people. But then if you bear in mind, certainly World Cup of 98 under Hoddle, he was a pretty young guy there. He'd have been in his early 20s tops. So he I think people are surprised at the number of caps Scholes got because obviously he retired relatively early from the international,
which was a shame.
Scene. It was
especially as he sort of reinvented himself a bit later on in his career and probably could have played that deep line role for England for quite some time.
Have you seen the interview with him on the overlap?
I have, yes.
Gerrard? Yeah, and I think there's obviously a lot of not a lot. There's a couple of. I think there's an issue about home and being at home and not liking being away, as well as obviously the family issues that played into that.
Well, I'm not saying he doesn't have his reasons. It's just a shame that he couldn't have played that role for England for quite some time.
I think what was quite interesting, and I think we'll probably talk about this though, is that he never, and you could argue to a point, none of them did, actually captured the brilliance that they showed for their clubs, which again comes back to our earlier comment, I suppose.
Yeah, that was the whole lot of them though. I can't think of too many tournaments post 2000 where that group of players did themselves proud, and I'm sure they would be the first to admit that.
Yeah. So Gerrard played in 3 Euro tournaments, 2000, 2004 and 2012, and 3 World Cups, 06, 10 and 14. He ended up with 114 caps, which is England's 4th most cap player. And Lampard played in Euro 2004 and 3 World Cups, the same ones as Gerrard, and ended up with 106 caps. So quite astonishing, really, when you look at the number of caps. And what talk us through some of your logic and give us some numbers, Jimbo.
I think I agree with you on this one. I think you've got these ones spot on. I think you probably have to go, if you're talking about an England career, and it's got to go on caps and number of tournaments where you've represented England. And I think you start at the top with Gerrard, most caps, most tournament appearances. Then you go down to Lampard, and then you go down to Scholes. It's not a reflection on them as the quality of them as players, but Gerrard played the most for England and was at the most tournaments. Yeah. Lampard was second. And then you've got Scholes, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because you wouldn't say any of them, ironically, I mean, Rooney had his time in 2004. You wouldn't really say any of them dominated any of those situations, but then is that coming back to it? I think it's got to be partly player-led. It's also got to be partly tactical and structure-led as well. Oh,
yeah, definitely. I mean, I know they don't like to admit that when you hear them talk about that. No. They typically
very
go down
brutally honest, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. But that is definitely part of it. It has to be. It was a strict adherence to a very rigid system that didn't suit the players who were playing, despite having, on paper, one of the best squads in the world at the time. So, that's a little bit unlucky at some of them. I mean, Frank Lampard scored a worldie against Germany that was chalked off, even though it went about 10 feet over the line.
He did. The only thing I would say is I almost think with that, I know we can cling to that, but I think it staved off the inevitable.
Oh, yes, we weren't going to win that game, but I'm sure he would have enjoyed scoring a 30-yard screamer against Germany at a World Cup.
I can't remember which tournament it was, whether it was that one, was he the player that had the most shots without scoring at a major tournament?
I think it might have been that one,
since, I suppose, presumably since shooting at the goal became a stat whenever they started recording.
Yeah, I think it may have been that one. It was either that or the previous, because I do remember it coming up. So, yeah.
So we'll move on. I suppose this one, style of play, effectiveness and evolution. That's a broad. I was obviously.
You've lumped them all in there, haven't you?
I've gone full flow there.
You thought I don't want to discuss each one of these things. I'm going to lump them all into the same category.
Take too long. I guess, and they all had phases, didn't they? I mean, you think about Scholes at the start of his career was very much an attacking midfield player, very much getting into the box, ability to score a goal. I think he'd played a lot as number 10 or centre forward in his earlier days. Mm-hmm. Evolving all the way back to kind of the quarterback role that almost, I think, seemed to be, even though it was probably not natural, it looked very natural, even though I think when you hear him speak, he said he didn't feel it was his natural game. It just felt to me that he had the game on a piece of string with tempo, and again, maybe not sometimes stuff that caught the eye, but just kept the team ticking, and his ability to find a pass, extraordinary.
Definitely, yeah, fully agree. I think of the three, the technically the most gifted of the three. I don't know if he had because I think he was part of a better squad of players.
Yeah, fair point.
I think he possibly didn't have quite the same individual effect on the team as the other two possibly did, especially one of them. But that's why I think this one's quite difficult, because style of play, he might be at the top. Effectiveness, would he be at the top? That's why it's quite difficult to add these three. So
we've got to make these things a bit difficult.
We do. I would say that Scholes for me is probably, if you combine all three of those, I would probably go with an 8.
8. Okay, we share that mark there.
It's going to be difficult to separate these two, because, as I say, I think Scholes is going to be stronger in one of the three aspects, whereas I think the other two are going to be stronger in the other aspects. So. Yeah. Although evolution, I guess, he did change to the deep line role
massively,
as well.
and I think and I think again you could say the same for. I mean, Gerrard started off as very much. I know he played full-back when he first came in, but that was more, I think, to ease him into the team. But to me, he, out of all three, was the guy that was a bit of a throwback. I suppose probably the nearest thing to Bellingham that now where could do everything.
Box to box.
To defend, had the engine to get around the pitch. And I think so many times was, for Liverpool, he basically just got games.
Dragged them along.
Yeah, and he had an engine, proper midfield. And then even right at the end of his career where he played, Brendan Rodgers was kind of clever enough to get him in that sort of quarterback role again, where he showed his versatility and intelligence to be able to do that. So, and I think for me, just because of that ability to sort of really, I suppose, impact on games in a spectacular way, I went for a 9 on that one.
See, I would think it was. No, I was thinking more 8, but after hearing that, I think you're right. I think it probably is more of a 9. So I mean, surely he almost gets a 9 just for the impact he had on that team.
Yeah, and I suppose we've got influence of play on coming next, but they are a bit intertwined. I'll give you.
They are a little bit, yeah. Style of play, effectiveness, and evolution.
You're really thinking about this, aren't you? I like it.
I'm going to stick with an 8 with that. I think they.
Oh, you're just trying to fix your scores now. Trying to fix your scores.
And then Lampard gets a 20.
45, yeah. I'd given Lampard an 8 for this because I think it's quite. I think when you watched him at West Ham, a lot of people weren't convinced, if that makes sense.
Well, there's that famous clip, isn't there, of the fan
very much
having a go at Harry.
Harry Redknapp was, in fairness, and he was pretty verbose on that one, and correct. He was, said. He was almost. I think it was interesting in that Chelsea team because he was almost. I mean, the goal scoring side of it is unparalleled. But he was almost in that period of time. He was almost like an auxiliary forward. It wasn't really getting involved. I would, outside looking in loads of build-up play, it was bomb on, and Drogba, fantastic centre forward. In fairness to Lampard, I think towards the tail end of his career, he did show that there was a bit more to his game than that. Albeit maybe I would have said not to the level of Gerrard or Scholes, but you may disagree.
No, I agree with you on that. I think though effectiveness is the one where I feel like style of play possibly is maybe at the bottom of the pile of here. Evolution, I would say, is also maybe towards the bottom of the three. Again, we're splitting hairs. They all had exceptional careers, but effectiveness. It's very hard to look past a midfielder with the all-time greatest goal-scoring record at Chelsea, and for 5 seasons, was it not 20 goals a season for 5 seasons? I mean, you're talking about striker levels of
it was off the chart, really.
Like a top striker would be over the moon with 5 solid years of 20 goals. So that one I think boosts him back a little bit, but I think of the. It's hard to split them because they all, again, as I said, they all seem to have shown slightly stronger than the other two in one of these 3 aspects. So I'd be tempted to go with an 8 again with this one and have the kind of all the 3 of them across the board as 8s.
D'accord. Moving on to the influence of the teams they played in, we've started to touch upon this. I think with Scholes, I think it felt to me that, and you've sort of alluded, certainly at the start of his career, he was one of many.
Yeah.
Good players, if that makes sense. Now, that's not to decry him in any way,
No, it's just an
But
exceptional squad.
you look at
wasn't
that Manchester United midfield of the sort of 99 era, and I mean, wow. I mean, has there been a better midfield forever lineup in the Premier League or even in the top flight?
They'd be in the conversation every time, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. I think very much as you moved into the 2000s, though, when Keane had left and he played that, I think he was very integral then, because I think he really did control the tempo and the format of the game. But I think based on it being almost sort of two halves, I went for an 8 there again, which may sound harsh, but I kind of think, as I say, based on the one of many aspect.
I would agree with you on that. I think we're actually in agreement across the board on this one again. But
oh, really? This is worrying.
I think so.
Okay.
I would agree with you. I think not taking anything away from him, but his influence on the Manchester United teams he played in is not, I don't think, as high as the influence Steven Gerrard and Frank Lampard had on their teams. So I would put him as the 8 in this situation. Okay. High, but can't give him a higher score because the other two, I think, get the other two scores. So.
And interestingly, I guess in that period, Gerrard played, despite winning a Champions League, Gerrard played in the weakest of the three sides, certainly on a consistent basis over a 10-year period.
But I think that's had the most influence.
Absolutely. And I think I went for a full bag Tensky here because I just think, that team that won the Champions League was pretty ordinary. And if he hadn't have done what he'd done, not just in the final itself, but the Olympiacos group game, the games throughout, FA Cup final in 2000. I mean, there's numerous games where he basically, him and Carragher in a different way, but they pretty much were the team with some other, and that's massively patronising because obviously professional sport and professional football doesn't work like that. But he was. Yeah,
he was. Yeah, I think he, by a mile, would take this one. We already said it. He dragged that Liverpool team to certain titles. I mean, you mentioned it before the Champions League that the screamer in the FA Cup final as well. He was Liverpool, wasn't he, for the time he was there?
Absolutely. And Lampard, I think, was an integral part of that Chelsea team, the Mourinho era and then beyond. So, and
a survivor as well of the. He was at Chelsea prior to the money and the big investment, and he actually managed to. He was an ever present in that team all the way through.
Well, he was there at the start, wasn't he? Because he was one of Abramovich's first signings. Well, I should say, Ranieri's first signings. But you're right. He kind of stood the test of time, and actually, I suppose with Drogba, Terry and Cech was very much the spine of that side for nearly a 10-year period, I guess.
Yeah, which is extremely impressive considering how ruthless Chelsea were as an operation through that time. Yeah. You think if any of them had gone off the gas for a season, they probably would have been out the door, just in the same way that managers were. So for him to keep that place and drive that team and be a massive part of their success, scoring all those goals from midfield. I think he's got to be a 9 or a 10 as well. But because I don't think he's at the level of Gerrard, we're calling Gerrard a 10, I would put him as a 9.
Ne fait la banque, Mr. Bond. Right then, so we move on to joy factor. No, there's not that.
This one's tricky though.
It is subjective.
So subjective. This one.
But that's what it is. This is what it's about. We're not here. We're entertaining a mix of fact and fantasy, if you will. Yeah. So joy factor for me. I mean, I gave Scholes an 8 because I liked the kind of understated class. I probably prefer the sort of explosive all action of Gerrard with a 9. And I kind of think, in a way, Lampard is like grooved, like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
8.5 out of 10 every week. You know what you're going to get. So, but not necessarily joy factor. I don't know. Do you agree or disagree? I guess
I see where you're coming from, but I think I get most of the joy I get from watching football. Apart from you watch a great team play, that's joy in itself. But it's a lot of the goal scoring that I get. That I enjoy the most. And out of the three of these, he is by a mile beyond the other two when it comes to goal scoring and impact in that regard. So I'd be tempted to give Lampard a 9 in terms of joy factor again because I look at it as. Well, he scored a lot of goals.
You love the girls, man.
I do like the goals. And I like the way he scored them, the late run into the box.
Yeah.
You know,
that appeals to your artisan.
it does. I just think the way he read the game, the way he impacted the game from a position, and the way he impacted the game in a way that you would not traditionally see a midfielder impact the game. I think that would be high on the joy factor for me. I think the other two probably get 8s in this one. Because I just think they were more, for me, doing things that I would expect a midfielder to do.
Okay.
They did it at a very, very high level and had different levels of, as we've discussed in a previous, I think, impact or influence on their teams necessarily. But I would expect the things that Gerrard did for his team to be the things the midfielder would do, and the same for Scholes. So I give them both an 8. It feels harsh doing it, but I give them both an 8 for the joy factor.
It depends. You pay your money, it takes your choice. I think I loved Gerrard's sort of explosive all-action approach, and I guess that's it's personal.
But you like the
spectacular,
and but also like I can imagine you probably enjoying a few of the hard tackles that that Gerrard would put in as well. Whereas I'm not as bothered about that aspect of the game. I prefer the of the three of them.
One always needs a little bit of grade A violence just to spice things up. And I suppose finally,
what did you have for these ones?
I had 8 for Gerrard. Sorry, 9 for Gerrard, 8 for Scholes, 8 for Lampard.
All right, okay, so
fairly.
Okay,
I mean,
similar.
Again, a bit like the other one we did. You're splitting hairs, really, in terms of longevity. I must admit, I couldn't split them on this one because
they're all around forever, weren't they?
Yeah, and still winning stuff, and also all of them evolved how they played. Which, to be honest, it's one thing I think. You know, and you know, I mean, crikey, Scholes even came back, didn't he? Retired for a bit and then came back and was still superb. So, I, if I'm honest, I couldn't split them on this because I just thought, well, they're all exemplary in terms of
kept themselves fit, didn't they?
Well, yeah, you know,
good attitude
and having the brain, the football brain. Once your body maybe starts slowing down slightly to adapt and be able to play in a different way. Yeah. So I don't know. Again, open to your thoughts.
I think you're right. I don't think there's any way to split them. They all played forever, and it was. I mean, possibly you look at it and think maybe a tiny bit of luck because you never know what might happen with injuries. But you know, that aside, they obviously looked after themselves well. They obviously had the right attitude, and they were able to play for, you know, what would have been very competitive dressing rooms and squads, and they've still managed to hold down their place very late into their career. So, I guess what would be interesting to explore with you, Jimbo, just before we do the final sort of totting up, it'd be great. What do you think their best moments, each of them, would be? It'd be good to get your thoughts on that. Best moments. I can't look past Gerrard's heroics and. There's probably two that stand out for me, but one because I would say it's a bigger trophy would be his exploits in the Champions League to win them the game that got them to the final, I guess. Yeah. And then obviously the final against West Ham. Yeah. Although that was really one moment right at the end. I think in the Champions League he kind of done it the whole tournament. The whole game, yeah. So probably those two would be the ones for Gerrard. For Scholes, it's harder because I think Scholes was more consistently... Maybe not as many standout moments, but just consistently like a, 8.5 out of 10. The one that and it's probably one that is fairly irrelevant, but do you remember when we played Scotland in a playoff for the Euro 2000, where Keegan had just taken over? I'm not... We had to play them at Hampden, then we played them at Wembley. Right. And we won at Hampden, and he got both goals and was brilliant that day. And I remember that's I don't know why that sticks out. I mean, typical England, we then played like a drain and lost 1-0 at Wembley, but still went through. But yeah, I know what you mean. The game, I suppose, 2008, on the way to the Champions League final against Chelsea, the goal against Barcelona, the outside of the box. I was going to say the screamer he hit with it. Yes, I would. And then you've got the volley against Bradford, the volley against Villa from corners. You could hit it. Yeah. I just think he did it sort of. He did it quite so often. You think, well, which of the moments would be the big one? And he won that much as well. There's not, with Gerrard, he didn't win as much. So you can pick the standout moments. But he won that trophy and he won that trophy. But Scholes wins 25 trophies. Like, which of them was the big one? So it's more difficult to pick. With Lampard, against a serial winner, I don't know. Possibly the run to the way he played in the run to the fight. And I know they didn't play particularly well in the Champions League final, but he was
still part of that. So I suppose his peak as a player for
that probably was the best moment for him. And I would argue, he was fairly influential and integral in that team, even though it was a bit of a turgid final, and they won it on pens.
Good stuff. Well, good to explore that with you, because that's given me just enough time to top them all up, and
interesting. Wow, actually very interesting.
Pretty close, isn't it? Yeah. So in reverse order, as these things go, we've got Paul Scholes. Our combined average between our two scores of 48.5.
I've been more generous there, just in case anyone hates us for not picking Scholes. I've been slightly more generous than James.
Martin Law. Lampard second with 50.5.
Again, slightly more generous on my side.
Again, yeah. And actually, we were dead equal. So 51 for Gerrard.
Yeah, I couldn't split them.
There. So yeah, interesting. And again, a bit like last, I think our marking last time was fairly tight as well, as you'd expect, because when you're dealing with,
we're not picking three people that are going to be miles apart from each other,
or two that are rubbish. But we, what's the word? It's interesting when you do it like this. I think it does throw up. What the one good thing about doing it this way, I think, is that it gets over your prejudices in that sense of, I would definitely...
You see each aspect of it,
yeah. Whereas I would always pick Scholes and Gerrard ahead of Lampard. But actually, when you're forced to look at these things by category, you can't diss. You have to mark it, in the appropriate way and in a fair. And it does make you, and it probably makes it a lot tighter as a result, because you're kind of going a bit on data rather than just gut feel or personal like of how they play us.
Yeah, because if we just ask this question, who's your favourite, that would be almost purely subjective. Well, all of this is, but as you say, you kind of, on some of them, you can't deny it. Like the trophies won and the appearances for England, etc. You can't dispute that. So, but yeah, so I'm assuming you'd pick a Gerrard, or I thought it would have been a Gerrard over a Scholes or a Lampard, and mine would be a Lampard over Gerrard or Scholes. So it is interesting when you actually get it down to look at it. Yeah. Although I couldn't split. I thought there would have been at least 1 or 2 points between Gerrard and Lampard, but they were both the same for me at the end.
Pretty terry tight. Well, we hope you've enjoyed it, as always. Delighted to have had a little bit of a barroom chat in terms of bringing you top trumps with a Z, and there'll be more to come as we meander through the year. But thank you for listening. Whether that's watching, yes, I was about it. Which again, we hope you're enjoying your YouTube experience with us, and we'll be there's plenty more to come, isn't there? So there's plenty more in the pipeline.
Definitely, yeah. No, it's been good.
So thanks for listening, and we look forward to catching up again soon. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.